Welcome to Backstage Chat with the Miskatonic Playhouse. This evening we have with us Nick Brooke, who is a Chaosium ambassador for the Miskatonic Repository. Nick, thank you very much for being with us here tonight.
Thank you very much for having me on the Miskatonic Playhouse.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. We do have a series of questions from our quite wonderful community. So if you're happy to, I'm keen to kind of fire off some of these questions so we can kind of get a sense of.
I'd be delighted to answer your questions. As we discussed beforehand, my safe word is bollocks. So if anything goes astray, we'll just fall into that.
Superb, thank you. And I like that we've set the tone really early on. So that's the best way to do things, I think. Fantastic. Okay, so our first question, Nick, is actually from Stuart Sellens, and we actually ran his scenario. He's our first scenario that we've run.
Dragon of Wantley.
Dragon of Wantley.
Dragon of Wantley. Love that cover.
Yeah, it's superb, isn't it?
And I stole a marketing trick from Stuart, and I don't know if you know me well, but that is a real compliment. He did a special St. George's Day sale for his dragon slaying adventure, and I have a dragon slaying adventure, so I just jumped on that bandwagon and rode it all the way to...
I did exactly the same thing. In fact, I contacted you and said, "Can I do that as well?" And he went, "Yeah, done." Okay, well there you go. There's a good bit of advice for everybody straight away in the community.
What's Stuart wanting to ask me? Why did you do that, you bastard?
Not quite. Stuart's question is this. And so his question is, how did you get involved with community content in the beginning? And this is something that Bridget Jeffries has said to us, that there is a bit of a story here.
Oh, yeah. She wants all the dirt to come out. All right, I can answer that then. That's very straightforward. I've loved these role-playing games for all my adult life and a while before that too, since I was too young to know what I was doing with them probably. I was about 10 or 11 when I started playing that weird hybrid of Dungeons and Dragons that was the only thing that existed back then before the Dungeon Master's Guide had come out. And I progressed into RuneQuest by the age of 12 or 13 because I got tired of all the racism and sexism and alignment essentialism and fascism and stuff that was baked into early D&D. So I was playing RuneQuest as a teenager. I went to university. Avalon Hill was mangling RuneQuest badly at the time. This was the late 80s, early 90s. And so when I finished at university, and because I'm slack, I hadn't got a job to go to, I wrote a nice letter to Chaosium saying, hi, I've just finished university. I love your games, especially that RuneQuest one. Call of Cthulhu's cool, but I didn't mention that in the letter. And I said, is there anything I can do to help with RuneQuest? I didn't say it because it's all looking a bit bumpy in the artist shit. And they said, I got a letter back from Greg Stafford, which was rather nice. He was the president of Chaosium at the time. And he said, if you want to help with RuneQuest, the best thing you can do is get in touch with an Englishman called David Hall, who is running a fan magazine called Tales of the Reaching Moon, which I've never heard of. And I thought, that sounds like a good idea. So I got in touch with David Hall, and he got back to me, and he invited me to join his RuneQuest gaming group that met fairly close to where I lived. And he invited me to help him produce the magazine Tales of the Reaching Moon. And he also said, and next month I'm going to Dublin for a games convention called GaelCon, where Greg Stafford is a guest of honor. Why don't you come along? And so I did, and that's when my life changed, and I became involved in producing fan content. This isn't community content in the modern sense. David was working with absolute support from Chaosium and from Avalon Hill eventually, which was very nice to see, and from Issaries Inc. when Greg left Chaosium and founded his own company to do his own thing. And he was producing a beautiful, gorgeous magazine that's really lovely, and I was helping with that. Not writing very much, but a lot of proofreading, a lot of advice, behind the scenes kibitzing, and just hanging out with the guys. And it was glorious. That was all through the 90s I was doing that.
Wow.
And then it stopped. And the real reason is probably human. We grew up, we got married, we had children, we went to live on different continents. David fled to Australia, Rick was deported back to America, and Colin left for New Zealand, and there was just me left in England. And I had 2 crying children. So, I had a few fallow years of gaming and then picked it up again a bit in 2008 and even more when I found a local club in about 2013. And then there was the new edition of RuneQuest on the horizon, and then it arrived in 2018. It was glorious. It's beautiful, really beautiful game. Love that game. I might have mentioned it before. And then in December of 2019, there's a convention that used to happen annually in London in the before times called Dragon Meet. And my friend Michael O'Brien from Chaosium, who used to be one of the editors of Tales of the Reaching Moon, and who I'd met frequently at the vigorous convention scene that existed all through the 90s and early noughties, was attending from Chaosium. And he said, we're about to launch something called community content. And I thought, that sounds a bit crap. You saw people chucking out scenarios, I suppose, with no quality control. And he said, yeah, just like that. So he said, there's no quality control, no editorial supervision. You can just publish whatever you like. He said, why don't you do some of your stuff? You might have stuff that you previously published in Tales, or stuff that you never got published in Tales because it wasn't good enough, or things you've been working on since. And I thought, yeah, probably do that. And I tried. And people liked my first scenario, and they loved my first book where I was editing and laying out, but other people had done all the work. And it just grew and grew. So A Rough Guide to Glamour, which you can see sitting on the shelf behind me, became our first print-on-demand title and first gold medalist on the Johnstown Compendium. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff more. My room isn't normally like this. I'm not weird. This is just to show off my stuff while I'm here, because otherwise I have to keep up my stuff. So what I found was that because I'd been involved in producing the magazine in the 90s, and I'd learned at the knee of the late, great Steve Thomas, who was Tales of the Reaching Moon's layout guru, there's a skill set to making these things look nice, which I have. And the tool set is not unreasonably expensive. If you think, well, I'm probably going to sell 100 of this scenario and I'll price it at this much, and for that much, I could run the software I need to create this for half a year. And all I need to do is bring out a second book after the first and a third book after the second, and it's utterly self-sustaining. But you get scared away by that thought, what if nobody likes my stuff? And on the RuneQuest side of things, that's a very foolish worry to have, because everything sells 50 and then 100 copies if it is remotely like what people want to buy. So you can basically, my advice to RuneQuest creators nowadays is just budget on the assumption you're going to sell 100 copies in the first few months, because you are, unless you're writing something that is deliberately objectionable, set in a part of the world nobody plays their games, is crap, looks like rubbish, and you don't market it. And that you could probably fail for that. But we've got a very loyal, very content-starved fan community. But that's one thing I wanted to talk about with respect to the Miskatonic Repository, because the difference the repository's got, now that's been running now for almost 4.5 years, is that there has been continuously produced Call of Cthulhu and related stuff for more than 40 years. And some of it is extraordinarily high quality. So there's the big campaigns, the scenario collections, there's the licensed spin-offs that go into all kinds of weird directions. And that stuff keeps coming out from Chaosium and its licensees. We won't talk about weird competitors that file off the serial numbers, because fuck those guys. And there's a lot of it. So it's quite hard to get noticed in the Miskatonic market, where you're bringing out a Call of Cthulhu scenario into a market that's got loads of Call of Cthulhu scenarios. That's why you really need things like striking cover art or interesting settings. Or, if we're getting desperate and you really, really want to sell, I suppose you could always go with sea shanties in order to make a splash. And that's what Paul did. I have great respect for that guy usually, but jumping on some kind of TikTok trend of the early pandemic, well, what can you say, really? So there we go. I think that's the big difference in the markets, is with you have to make a little bit more of an impact, and creators are making that impact on the Miskatonic side than with RuneQuest, where everyone's starved and there has not been 40 years of continuous high-quality production that fan stuff is competing with. There have been long lulls and gaps in production and things people have wanted that have never been provided by the official company. So us fans are going and doing it ourselves. And take this, or you could maybe wait another 25 years and see if Chaosium does anything in the space you're interested in. But in the meantime, we've got 4 fat books about the Lunar Empire up there. They've got a few paragraphs. We've got an entire linked campaign set in Sun County in Prax. They've got 1 paragraph description of it that gets some things wrong. And it's like, this is why we are doing so well, is because of the difference in between the RuneQuest Glorantha scene and the Miskatonic scene. But the Miskatonic Repository is a hugely successful community content program. There are some real stars emerging from it. It's had gold and platinum best-selling titles. It's a great place to be. But you do need to have your scenario noticed. And that's why it's really nice to be talking to the Miskatonic Playhouse tonight, because I think you guys working with Call of Cthulhu creators, oh my God, the lights went out, that's better. You guys working with Call of Cthulhu creators can really help get some undiscovered gems into the light.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think that's a big part of our intention as well, is to find those, just expose community to community. We're community content creators. creating for community's sake.
But I haven't yet answered Stuart's question because I like the sound of my own voice. He was asking, how did I get the Chaosium gig as a community content ambassador? And the answer is, I've known all of the guys who run the Chaosium for donkey's years. I knew Mob since the very early 90s when he was doing Tales. Rick came on board. He was a friend of mine. He came over to the UK and I was the first person he used his Ford expense account to buy a huge slap-up feast for. He married one of my wife's best friends who we met at a party in our flat, and he came on board to Tales and took over the layout chores from Steve. I know Jeff and Neil of Chaosium because they were at GloranthraCon, I think it was 5, in Canada, in Victoria, British Columbia, where we got Greg Stafford dressed up in drag playing one of the Lunas from our glorious book up there. And, so that's decades of knowing these people. So I knew them, they knew me, they knew what I could do, they knew I was a safe pair of hands, that I wouldn't go doolally. I've been involved on and off in whatever online communities exist. So mailing lists back in the day and Yahoo groups when everything moved to Yahoo groups. And nowadays, Facebook, there's the Burp Central forum, and there's even some Discords where I'm sticking my toe tenderly into the discourse on Discord, but not sure it'll last. Not sure it'll last. But so anyway, they knew me, they knew what I could do, and they could see that I had a real passion for getting this community content out there, encouraging other people, working with the people in our creators circles. There's the Miskatonic and Johnstown Compendium creators circles. Yeah. So after a while, they thought, oh, sorry, give them a job. So they gave me a Greg Stafford Award for services rendered and a chaosium.com email address, which is the thing I really wanted, and a diplomatic immunity. So if I kill you, they can't arrest me. Just so you know.
I like it. That's the true, as you mentioned to me before, that's the true role of an ambassador, isn't it?
Oh, we also get to deliver ultimatums and declare wars. Everyone thinks it's all about circulating at cocktail parties and swigging back the G&Ts, and it is about that too.
Oh, well, yeah.
But there's other words. So anyway, that's the answer, Stuart. And thank you for asking. As you can probably tell, I like talking about myself, and I'm sure that Pete behind the scenes will be cutting off lots of that answer and putting it in the bin.
Well, there you go, Stu. That is your question right there. The second question is going to be actually from Pete. So Pete Burgess asks us, do you have a favourite Miskatonic Repository scenario which you'd like to recommend to the community?
Now, this is where I have my guilty conscience comes out, because you may have noticed that moments in the first answer that I talked a lot about a game that isn't Call of Cthulhu. I've got a skill set that lets me bring things out in print. And I bring things out in print for RuneQuest, and I also bring things out in print for Call of Cthulhu for the Miskatonic Repository. And I like doing it. It's fun. It helps people who wouldn't otherwise get their book. And I can tell you, it's absolutely wonderful to get a printed copy of your own thing with these glossy covers and beautiful art and everything, and see what went wrong and notice that one word you never changed and now it's in the wrong place forever and everyone will curse you. But there you go. So I'm good at getting things into print. What I'm not good at is playing a lot of Call of Cthulhu. I played back in the early 80s when it first came out because everybody did. There were, in the UK at the time, if you weren't playing D&D, which I wasn't, there was RuneQuest, there was Traveller, and there was Call of Cthulhu, and I was eyeballs deep in all of those. But that was a brief passing teenage fad. I got to university, I played in a brilliant Call of Cthulhu campaign run by my best mate, Chris Skidlow, who co-authored a bunch of the stuff up there, so we're still talking to each other 30 years later. So we can't be that bad. He ran a Call of Cthulhu, what we now call a gaslight campaign, set in Victorian London in 1888 against the backdrop of the Ripper murders and a whole bunch of weird stuff going on. And the lovely feature of this was it wasn't particularly Lovecraftian. It was mythos-like, cosmic horror-ish, but it was all through a Victorian lens. So you were, rather than going up against Nyarlathotep, Hotep, you might be going up against Sebek Hotep, the crocodile-headed pharaoh of the cursed 13th dynasty, whose mummy had recently been removed from Crocodilopolis and brought to the British Museum, where people were translating and reading aloud his funerary inscriptions for the first time. Or instead of going up against a dimensional shambling horror, you'd be going up against what folklore tells you is probably Walter the Wild Huntsman of Woodstock, a probably Norman baddie who rides through the night sky with his skeletal hounds. And there was all kinds of weird stuff going on. There was Queen Victoria's deformed mutant child who may or may not have been brought up at the bottom of a Scottish loch. There was the vampire Earl of Even marrying Countess Bathory in a Calvinist ceremony with no Christian insignia in the chapel and no mirrors anywhere, because that's vanity, don't you know? And we were all very suspicious and very mad. and the game was glorious. So I played a lot of Cthulhu, creative Cthulhu, run by Chris. And if you're listening to this, Mr. Gidlow, where the hell is our Berlin campaign? You arse. But I digress. So then, after university, occasional Cthulhu, because Cthulhu is a lovely pick up and put down game, but if you've got a few people sitting around and one of you is a good keeper, you can just play a one-shot Cthulhu and have a lot of fun. So that was my idiom for a lot of intervening time, during which I was playing, I think I got back into gaming with them, our old Kadim campaign for D&D, and then lots of Dark Heresy, which is kind of Cthulhu-ish and has a big Mason footprint, but it's set in space, so it's not really like Cthulhu at all. And you get big guns. You get to shoot Cthulhu with big guns, but he gets to shoot back at you with even bigger guns. So it's not.
There's a hell of a trail there.
My recent Cthulhu playing experience began during this pandemic lockdown. Now, if you're listening to this from some kind of time vault, you may need to know that from roughly March of 2020 until pretty much now, there's been a global pandemic and everyone's dying and we're locked up in our own houses and we can't go anywhere. Now, in my home, we've got a couple of lodges. They're very nice. And my daughter, who was going to university from home and then working from home, she's very nice. And obviously, she's a gamer because she's my daughter. And of our two lodges, one had played games before a lot, does it very well, and one was gaming curious. So I said, well, why don't we try Call of Cthulhu and see if it's your cup of tea? And I ran Chaosium's scenario, The Necropolis, out of Gateways to Terror, which is absolutely lovely. It's basically discovering Tutankhamun's tomb gone wrong. Really fun, very evocative. It's designed as a 1 hour scenario, but if you long-winded like me and you enjoy describing Egyptian tombs and sinister stuff going on, you can easily pad that out. If you just played Assassin's Creed Origins, you'll already have a feel for the kind of environments you're moving through as that scenario goes, and you can just make it creepy. It's very, very good. So I enjoyed that. And for our second game, that was a one night one. Second game, we ran Blackwater Creek over 2 sessions and ended in a magnificent total party kill. Absolutely gorgeous. I mean, that scenario is designed to chew up and spit out investigators, and it did. That was great fun. And then we played Lynn Hardy's The Children of Fear. I started running that when it was only available in PDF. We graduated to the hardback by the end of it, and it was great fun. We were basically Indiana Jonesing it. So there's a lot of red line travel. We had wonderful, charismatic investigators. My daughter drew a picture of them, which I've shared on the Call of Cthulhu Facebook group. And she said it was a cunning plan. She said, I've decided to make us all look really kind of cute and interesting so that you won't just want to murderize us. And it worked. I didn't kill any clip players, any investigators. I'm sorry, always on the wrong side of that line. I didn't kill any of the investigators during that, but we had a great time going around discovering weirder and weirder things about Tantric Buddhism as they traveled around Central Asia into Tibet and beyond. And it was all very, very glorious. And recently we've kicked off Masks. I'm not sure how far we'll get, but we've pretty much polished off. We did Peru in a night with lots of pisco sours and ambient Latin jazz. We've pretty much done New York. And next stop will be England, which is brilliant because I live here. I know all about what's creepy and weird about London. So,
nice.
That's my Cthulhu experience. But as you've seen, there isn't much room in that for me to say, and I also constantly play and playtest Miskatonic Repository scenarios written by my good friends. They're all good friends. By the time I finish their books, it's like, we know what makes each other tick. But that's why I can't honestly say the favorite Miskatonic Repository scenario I have played is X. What I will say is that every scenario I've prepared for print has been lovely. They are beautifully presented, they are different, and they are creative, and they work. And this, I think, is the real advantage that community content has over, if my friends Chaosium will forgive me, bland corporate pap. Community content creators have a huge advantage that nobody is telling them what they can and can't do, apart from stuff that isn't actually legal to do or moral. I mean, we say no extreme adult content, and we also say don't go playing with copyrighted things that aren't yours to play with, and we will do our best to identify those for you. But other than that, you can do it your own way. You can write the scenario the way you think your scenario should be run. And maybe you're wrong, maybe you're right. But whatever it is, that's you down on the paper. And you can see that in these scenarios. They aren't written to template. They are written by people who've got a story to tell and they want to tell it the best way they can. And that's lovely. That's very exciting. I like it a lot. So that's why I'm a fan of community content, because my fear with Call of Cthulhu is that once you start leaning on the Lovecraft tropes, on the way you know that a H.P. Lovecraft Cthulhu mythos story is meant to work, it becomes kind of predictable and kind of samey, and everyone's like, oh, the King of Yellow again. Didn't we defeat him last campaign? And oh yeah, the smell of whatever it is, that must be a Chthonian. And it's like, no, that's not interesting. I know that Chaosium did some self-parody and stuff about that with Cthulhu-themed dungeon bashes and tips to investigators on how to survive, which are all basically nonsensical, act like a moron and then get killed. But it's like, I don't think you need that. I think what you need is a good story that grips you and wants to pull you in. And that's why things like the cover for The Dragon of Wantley are so exciting, because I just see that and you think, yeah, I'm sure I've seen that film. I'm sure I've seen that movie. And I think the covers that Alex Gillott does for the Grindhouse series and related stuff.
Oh, yeah, like fantastic.
Carnival of Madness and Highway of Blood. He's just got the 60s, 70s aesthetic down pat. He's brilliant. And I understand he's offering to do covers and advice on graphics to any community content creators. You would be mad not to take him up on that. It's an astonishing offer. His stuff is always consistently brilliant. And I've never met or spoken to the guy. So that's from the heart. I see his covers and I think, that's good. That's really good.
Yeah, Alex is fantastic. And he's just to say, he's been in touch with us at the Playhouse, and hopefully we're going to be getting him in to either play with us or maybe even run one of his scenarios for us. So very exciting, very exciting.
You're going to be so mutilated. That's really fun. Well, the one thing I will say is, if you find out in casual conversation while you're setting up that, if he has any interest at all in Bronze Age psychedelic mythological role playing, because we could tempt him to the dark side.
Okay, yeah, don't worry, that'll come up in conversation, and I have no doubt with a man of that kind of creative talent, he's going to be interested in a fair few things.
Yeah.
Isn't he?
It's Sword and Sandal movies from the 50s. The posters are beautiful and iconic. He could do those. He could do those till the cows come.
No, he pointed out that actually that he does. He's done a few trailers as well. And I know that there's a few other individuals that do really fantastic trailers. I know Pete Burgess does some fantastic trailers, and one that he did, it was brilliant.
I saw one for Virus. That was gorgeous.
That was it. Virus is the one we got talking about, but then he linked to me to one of his earlier ones, and it just absolutely resonated. The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing, like the mood and the atmosphere and everything, and I was totally sold on it. Within seconds, I was like, I want to play that. I want to play that.
Seen the cover tease, the pipeline.
That was it. I think that was it.
Yeah, all the credits for the pipeline and movie poster stuff, and that's just that's so well done. Really like that. I'm full of envy. I really admire what he's doing design wise, and also extraordinarily talented and productive. So I'm very envious actually.
Oh, well, there you go, Alex. When you're watching this, drop yourself a little comment in the bottom there, and have some community content creators get in touch with you, and let's show off some of that community work, shall we? Because it's amazing. Brilliant. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Nick, for that one.
That was Pete's question, wasn't it? Thank you, Pete, for asking that.
That was Pete's question. We're going to go to Anthony Richards' questions now, or Anthony Richards' question. Sorry if I've said your name wrong there, Anthony. What's the funniest in-game role-playing story you have to tell?
Ooh, yes. Okay, you gave me a little warning that this one was coming, and I will share it with you, but I've got to warn your audience that what I'm going to say now is a spoiler for something that happens quite close to the end of the Children of Fear campaign, although I'm pretty sure it won't have happened in anyone else's campaigns quite this way. So my daughter, who has worked out how to abuse the Call of Cthulhu rules, plays characters with absurdly high credit ratings. They're traveling through darkest Tibet on their way to a final confrontation, and there's a local tribe that has two things in common. One thing is they live in a really rainy valley, and the other is that their witches like to poison people who are hugely successful, because that way their success will be stolen by the witches. And my daughter aced her credit rating roll and was able to distribute parasols from her extensive collection to all the people of this tribe, and became effectively like a living goddess among them. If you remember the way C-3PO was treated by the Ewoks, that's how she was treated by these Tibetans. And of course, the thing is, my daughter knew what this would lead to, and she was setting me up for a thing where I poison her, so she needs to be cured. So you get the Dr. Henry Jones Sr. Moment at the Grail. And it just came off like a treat. It was beautiful. Now, we were running on high energy then, and I had to finish the campaign slightly faster than I wanted to because we had the summer break and the lodgers pushing off to foreign parts as they do, Kent or somewhere, God knows, outside London anyway, so basically completely out of reach. But that was really nice as a piece of emergent stuff where I could see where she was going. She knew what she was letting herself in for. We all thought, yeah, we're going to go with this, and it just worked. It worked beautifully. So yeah, and the Children of Fear spoiler section is now over, but it's a brilliant campaign, and you should certainly get it and read it. One thing I loved about Children of Fear is, although there are mythostastic options, if you like your tentacles, you can also run it as a completely non-Lovecraftian weird tale of Tibetan Buddhism, which is what I did. It's like, why bother with the seafood and the tentacles when you can just have an immense amount of fun with the way this is written? Now, it's cleverly written. Lynn is very smart. There are multiple options for what big mythos bads could be behind everything that's going on, and they all make perfect sense as far as I can understand it. But you can just run it straight out of the box, not do anything Lovecraftian to it, and you've got a rollicking occult adventure and discovery story that will take you across a fascinating chunk of continent. So it's great stuff.
Fantastic. And do you know what? I think it's good that we do mention the Chaosium campaigns by Lynn Hardy and Paul Frick and Mike Mason, etc., because it's a lot of these campaigns that inspire a lot of the community content. It's a lot of these games that get us playing, and that's what drives this community that we've got.
Thanks for mentioning that, because that's something I did want to say that links to campaigns, is that please, for the love of God, don't make your first community content creation a campaign. Write a scenario, a nice tight scenario where you've got control of all the moving parts and you can finish the thing. That's great. Write that, publish that. If it goes well, write another scenario. Maybe it's thematically linked. Maybe it's a sequel to your first scenario. That's fine. Do that. Then do it again. Now, at that point, you've got 3 scenarios. You've got, half of a big campaign book. You're doing great. But what you don't want to do is write a scenario that doesn't make sense except as episode 1 of a campaign, that has an unsatisfactory ending because it's all threads dangling into part 2 of the campaign, and you set yourself out to write 7 scenarios when you've never actually written 1 scenario, and you have to make the whole thing hang together, and you need a vast engine of playtesters like the good folk at Miskatonic Playhouse or Bridget Slott at Symphony Entertainment. But you basically, I think your ambition is probably exceeding your grasp if you think your first community content product will be a vast campaign to rival Masks or Orient Express or Children of Fear. Indeed, make it emerge. Write stuff that makes sense standing on its own, and then grow out from that once you've got that secure base to work from.
That's really good advice.
You are entitled to ignore my advice. Everyone is. It's one of the nice things about being an ambassador. You're allowed.
Best advice is free advice, though.
Yeah,
the best advice is free advice. I think that's really good, because I know what I'm like as a writer. Also, I would get carried away.
I think not a lot of people might remember this, but the first ever Call of Cthulhu globe-trotting campaign, Shadows of Yog-Sothoth, was actually patched together out of 7 scenarios that were originally unrelated and written by different authors, that was submitted to Chaosium. And Sandy, who was very smart, said, you know what, we can string these together to begin with that and have a detour into that and carry on with that. We'll just have our MacGuffins running all through it rather than the MacGuffins the original authors had. And you'll end up getting eaten by Cthulhu, which is a happy ending for all Call of Cthulhu campaigns, I hope.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the thing. It's like, string the things together. Work with other authors if you want, collaborate. We'd be delighted if there was a kind of emergent campaign happening, facilitated on the creators circles or playhouses or the discords or wherever the young people go nowadays. I don't know. It's not something Chaosium will take a hand in organizing. I want to be very clear about that, but we'd be delighted to see it happen. On my side of the fence, we've had a lot of teams coming together to make Johnstown Compendium products. So several of the books behind me are the Sandheart series, which are written by John Webb and by Michael O'Brien, with cover art by Jacob Webb and interior art by Mark Baldwin and Dario Corallo, and layout and design by me. And that's consistent all through this 4-book series now. We just got together, we worked out we liked doing it. John's first scenario came out and it was okay, but it had potential. But he got an offer from an artist to do free illustrations of remarkably high quality. And he asked me if I could help with layout. And I said, yeah, I think I can probably help with layout. And because I was helping with the layout, we got it into print as well. And that's where things started steamrolling from. But it's just emergent groups that come together. Our Luna stuff is me and the gang. We wrote a lot of stuff back in the 90s, and we've been really having a lot of fun getting it out as community content nowadays. And there's other teams too, the Monsters of the Month team, the like. But I'm well off piece for the Miskatonics. I know that on the Miskatonic side, you've got things like the Polish Zdrozy team, who've produced dozens, it feels like, of titles in both Polish and English, and indeed translations into German. I think there's Spanish as well, and probably others. And there's the Grindhouse guys, which I think is Ian Christensen and Alex Gillop, who I raved embarrassingly about with my man crush on him earlier, but these things will happen. Take it in your stride. And of course, Alan Carey's amazing Seeds of Terror, which just look like
fantastic. Yeah, and I've played a few of those, and they are absolutely superb. And I've been messaging Alan a number of times, just going, when is there going to be a collected editions coming out that I can hold and perhaps cuddle at night? Because I think they're brilliant. I love the idea, and as a writer, seeing what Alan and his team do there, and they have that such kind of trimmed down version. I'm very jealous of that ability as well. That's a very kind of amazing skill that they've got there. Type 40, fantastic skill.
It is an amazing skill, and it's one I'm very pleased to tell you that Chaosium will shortly be leveraging, but I am sworn to secrecy and can't tell you more.
Ooh, that was almost like a premier information, but not quite there. I think that's okay. That's amazing. That's fantastic. Fantastic.
3 little letters, MOI, and that's what you're getting.
Okay, that's like half of my Wordle. That's just thank you, Nick. I'm going to go away and think on that one. Okay, but another community question here. We have, let me just see here. Okay, so we have Charles Matthew-Domain, and he has asked, what's exciting for you when reading a new scenario?
Thanks, Charles. That's a really good question. When I was a kid, scenarios were written effectively by beardy but not yet old geeks who were kind of in lab coats, because they were writing something to be a repeatable tournament experience. The first D&D modules were tournament scenarios, and you'd come to the tournament and you'd throw your people into the Tomb of Horrors and they'd all die horribly, and you'd say, that sucks, what a terrible scenario. And then you buy it and you put your friends through the same ordeal. And it's amazing the hobby ever got off the ground, really. But they were full of very detailed technical specifications saying this is exactly the size of this room, and this is the clinical description of this room, and these are how many monsters are in the room and how many hit points they've got, and blah, 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 blah. As you might have told, I kind of reacted against that. I think a scenario is a set of instructions to on my side of the fence, we'd say game master, on your side you say keeper, of how to present the experience you want to inflict on your players, how to get them excited when you're going for pathos, when you're lying to them and misleading them. I want to explicitly tell the GM, here in this scene, I want you to mislead them into a sense of security so that when you hit them with something surprising coming at them, they will be shocked and will react badly. And I find it's easier just to be upfront to the GM and saying, that's what I'm doing in this bit, rather than sort of trying to subtly write it around that. So in my own work, I give music cues, a trick I learned from a very excellent game master. I'll give him a shout out here. Phil Wright, who ran games for me at the Role Play Haven in Southeast London back in the before times. He had a gift for presenting things cinematically or indeed televisually or as pages from an epic comics adaptation of a minor Robert E. Howard work from the 1970s, which might have been full painted or might have just been full color. We're not sure, but we were sure when we were playing the games. So when you're in Prime Time Adventures, we knew that we were in a BBC TV production that would probably be shown, prestigious drama, probably shown at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night. And we got that specific, so that we knew what our genre was, only we knew what we could have fun with. And then he had a gift for narrating cinematic transitions or comic splash page opening scenes, so that if we're going to have our adventure and it's at Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, we'll open with a comic splash page of Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, a description of what London's like, and then we'll focus in on the dialogue from the characters, and that's you and what do you say. And it's just a lovely trick. And I use helicopter shots now in my RuneQuest campaigns to speed things along. I say, we're going to get them from A to B. And the best way of doing this is to now have a cinematic camera of them slogging across the landscape looking heroic. because everyone wants to look heroic while slogging across a landscape, but that way they're not saying, how many miles is it, and did I remember my bunion cream, and shouldn't we be hunting for food on the way? It's like, no, screw that, we don't have time for that. We're doing a panoramic helicopter shot of what you're going through. So what I like, to get back to your question, Charles, which is an excellent question, I like it when I'm opening a scenario, if it surprises me in the way it approaches things, if it's got a twist to it, and if there's a strong authorial, or I think if I was posh, I'd say auctorial voice. If you can tell that a human being was on the other side of this, they were writing something that they felt about, and they want to communicate that spark to you. That's what I really like when I'm reading a scenario, is a sense that this is a new voice. This is an author who's doing a thing, and they're willing to take risks and do it their way. They're not playing safe, and they want me to enjoy it. That really is what does it for me. It's that sense of human contact, as opposed to what I was talking about before, the kind of almost clinical, lab-coated, statistically here is what is going to happen approach of early scenarios. I want much more mood, and particularly for a horror-themed, investigation-themed game like Cthulhu, I want tips on how to make things creepy, how to make things dramatic. That sense of, well, this is the most... probably the most terrifying thing you can do to them at this point would be to do this, rather than say the monster enters the room. I'm probably reacting against a parody that hasn't existed for decades, but I am reacting strongly against it. So that's my advice to you. If you're writing a Call of Cthulhu scenario, write it with your heart, write it with love, and make it yours.
And where better to do that when you've got a sense of ownership on your own voice than community content. That's the perfect breeding ground to do that, isn't it?
That's actually why I write community content. Everything I write is already perfect and would not benefit from any editor at all. I don't want it to be rewritten to conform to a house style, or to have the best ideas cut out because they're a bit rude or a bit pop culture-y or whatever it is. I have one extraordinarily trusted friend, Diana Probst, who creates community content with the Beer with Teeth collective for the Johnstown Compendium, but who's also now been published by Chaosium in one of their recent RuneQuest scenario collections. She's very trusted because I'll drop my manuscript to her and she'll give it a read through, and she'll spot all the things where I forgot to explain something, or I'm assuming people know things that they don't, or I used the wrong word for some technical part of a spider's anatomy, or whatever it is, and she'll give me all that feedback. And then I will mock it, and I will either accept, obvious things like, oh yeah, I forgot to explain how we get from A to B. I might write in a bit, here's how you get from A to B, or just stick in another helicopter shot. Usually does the trick. And if she's being picky about something, I'll put in a footnote mocking the pickiness, but indicating that I do know that they're not called mandibles, they're called chelicerae, spider's mouth parts. But you didn't know that. And now you do. So you've learned something from reading.
Now I do, yeah.
The manuscript's purity is preserved, and that's the important thing. But no, seriously, you cannot review something you wrote yourself because you know what it says, and you're probably wrong. But you should, and I think must, get somebody else to read through everything you wrote and just say, hang on, that doesn't make sense, that paragraph's in the wrong place. I really think you should think twice about putting that in. Now, the Platonic ideal is the position that Bridget, my colleague, my co-ambassador, gets into. Bridget Jeffries of Symphony Entertainment likes playtesting her material to death. She likes to make sure that she's run it several times with several different groups, and then handed it off to other keepers to run with their own groups and give her feedback. And then based on that feedback, she will greatly enhance her scenario, and it will end up as an absolutely brilliant thing, much like this. But I don't have the contacts to do that. I suppose I could try to develop them. But my own feeling is, if I've run what I've written myself, if I've play tested it with a group of my friends, and it works, and it's all there, and it's passed the Diana sniff test, and I'm genuinely appreciative of the time she puts into making my stuff better, and it does vastly improve it. It's just sometimes I laugh a lot at the process. Once it's through all that and it's laid out well enough, I will publish. And if I got something hideously wrong, I'm sure some kind person will be along to tell me in a while, because you may have noticed that I also moderate communities for Chaosium, and some of our fans have different filters than you or I, shall we say. So you'll publish your life's work, your masterpiece, then they'll look at it and they'll say, it says 60% on this page, but that should be 50%. And you'll say, did you want to say anything about the art, the soul, the spark, the joy that this book brought me? No.
Thanks for your contribution.
It's bugged me, and it should have been 50%. So what you do is you quietly, behind the scenes, issue an updated PDF with 50%, and also you change the name for the most degenerate character in the scenario to be the critic, and you feel good about it. But that's the thing. When you're publishing digitally, you can make enhancements to your stuff. And we've had a very good example of that recently on the Miskatonic Repository with Heinrich's Call of Cthulhu Guide to Character Creation. Now, Heinrich D. Moore of the Council of Shoggoths is, as you can tell, a very important Shoggoth. And he brought out this lovely thing based on the old central casting publications from, I think, the 80s, which were, why don't you have an interesting backstory for your D&D character? Oh, yes, because you're not imaginative enough. Here, have a buttload of tables to roll up the fascinating things that happened in your generic fantasy adventures backstory. And they're great products. They're really nice because they spark ideas and they spark ways of getting yourself involved in the plot. Heinrich's done that for Lovecraftian investigators, and it's a gorgeous book, but that was before Alex got his hands on it, because Heinrich published his thing and Alex got his hands on it and said, you know what, I could lay this out with art and design and stuff, and it would look amazing. And it does look amazing, and that's why, exclusive for the Miskatonic Playhouse, we submitted the print-on-demand files for Heinrich's Call of Cthulhu Guide to Character Creation to Drive-Thru RPG. I think it was yesterday morning, and they're currently queued for print-on-demand preparation. So, yeah, that's
amazing. That's amazing. And that is our first exclusive. And Heinrich, in our first episode, is our first keeper as well. So it's
there you go. Isn't it wonderful how
Heinrich Festival.
Almost as if it's a very small world.
Indeed,
but yes,
indeed.
And that book again, it looks absolutely gorgeous. Really, really beautiful.
Yeah.
I cannot say I've read every word of it. It's 156 pages, and I was doing checking on somebody else's layout and design. And what I can tell you is it's beautiful, but more importantly than that, it is within the 240% ink limit.
Oh, okay. Okay, there's an important nod there for anybody that's looking to...
Any pod people on the other side of this call will be nodding serenely and saying, oh,
I do. Okay, well, thank you very much, Nick. Thank you for that one. So we've got a couple more questions. Thank you very much for your time that you're giving towards this interview as well. So we've got John Hedge Hall, who is a lovely chap. Do know him very well. Lovely, lovely chap. And he's got a really good question, actually. His question is, where do you see the Miskatonic Repository going in the next 5 years?
To the moon. We recently had the first Chaosium summit on the eve of the first Chaosium con, and I was asked to prepare some slides showing how well the Miskatonic Repository has been doing in its 4 years of life. And the answer is it started out here, and recently it's gone here. So that's all very good. If my video is going to be flipped, then it started here, and it's recently gone here. So whether you read from right to left or left to right, I'm sure you've got the impression that we're basically moving kind of asymptotically towards an elder singularity that will devour the world quite soon. But until that happens, the Miskatonic Repository seems to be going from strength to strength. Now, I think there's various engines behind this. One of them is Chaosium does a very good job of marketing its community content. If you've subscribed to Chaosium emails, like the Ab Chaos newsletters, if you read their blogs and the links to blogs they drop on social media, and the squib posts on social media that don't link to blogs, or you follow their Twitter, you follow them on Facebook, you will see Chaosium marketing new stuff from the Miskatonic and celebrating the success of Miskatonic creations. But I think more importantly than that, sorry, Mod, has to be said, sorry, Brian, more important than that is the storytelling collective Write Your First Adventure workshops. We've had Call of Cthulhu tracks on that twice last year, and we will be doing it again this year. And we're hoping to develop a RuneQuest track, so watch this space. That's another exclusive if you want it. But as you probably know, the Write Your First Adventure workshop is a month-long course for aspiring adventure writers. The assumption at the start is you know what a role-playing game is, you know what dice are, you're vaguely familiar with the system you've chosen to specialize in for it. So it's not going to teach you to play Call of Cthulhu in a month, but it is going to teach you with handcrafted lessons by Mr. Paul Fricker, the tall vicar, exactly how to write a Call of Cthulhu adventure and publish it on the Miskatonic Repository. And in fact, the final lessons of the course are, right, have you got it laid out? Done. Have you made the PDF? Done. This is how you upload it. Have you uploaded it yet? Done. Right, now you've graduated the course. So as a result of that course, we've had dozens of new scenarios coming out in huge batches. There was the summer workshop and then the fall workshop, which I think is American for autumn workshop. They landed in, I think, early August or early November. whatever,
Yeah.
whatever. They were done. They were done when they were done. But each of those was a massive injection of new, high-quality Call of Cthulhu content written by first-time writers who'd been through a course teaching them how to write what they love, how to research, how to come up with original ideas, how to keep the spark alive, and how to get that across the finishing line. And I think the advice on getting across the finishing line, staying motivated, keeping your word count tight, knowing what you're doing, there's lessons there that are all about dealing with writer's block and how to navigate your way around the problems. With my RuneQuest campaign behind me there, Black Spear, I had writer's block for about half a year on there. I couldn't quite work out how to make a particular scene work. And then it struck me that, well, you know, if you have people being treated as dignified ambassadors rather than as ruffians who should be thrown in jail, the whole scene works much better. So why don't they just pitch the intro to that scene differently and say, oh, it's great to see you, come and meet our ruler, rather than, you, recreants, throw them in jail, and then we'll drag them out to talk to the ruler. Because you have to know what's going to work with players and what's not going to work. And I hadn't quite worked out how to make that happen. So I knew where I wanted to get to. I just hadn't worked out the path there. Luckily, I had a few other books to work on in the meantime, so it wasn't dead time, but it was frustrating. It was very frustrating not to know how to do things. And I didn't have any gaming happening at that time, of course, because we were in lockdown and my normal group couldn't get together and spread diseases to us because that would be illegal. If writer's block hits, you need tools and tricks for getting past it, and of course we'll teach you those as well. But the thing we love about it is at the end of that, people are graduating with their new stuff that they've written for the course, and it's good. And this one here, The Hammersmith Haunting, by Kat Clay, who's an established Australian author of various crime and mystery type stuff. We were really glad she's done it. She's a friend of some people at Chaosium, and obviously she's made this a beautiful, beautiful book. You know, there's gorgeous colour things in there. Oh yes, you've got it too. Sensible,
yeah, it is a wonderful, wonderful book.
Yeah, it just looks gorgeous. It's beautifully presented. It's really nice, very professional layout. She did it all herself. I didn't have a hand in this one. I just helped with some of the maybe if the mitrons were a bit tighter. This is what they meant when they said that, bits of pod production. But it was great to get that one out. And that's an example of a situation where we had a relationship with somebody, so they didn't need to meet our usual Electrum 250 sale threshold before being eligible for print on demand, because we knew she'd made something beautiful and we wanted to support it.
Yeah. And it is, and it really is. You know, that's another thing about this community is when you get to see other people's work, which is obviously what this community is about, is looking at other people's work, celebrating each other's work. It's just so inspiring. You know, when you get to play other people's work, see each other's work, it just sparks those creative things. And then the storytelling collective, Paul Fricker's 4 Fathom 5, absolutely superb.
What I wanted to talk about was the art. This cover pick is by John Sumrow, who's brilliant. I met him at Chaosium Con, where he was brilliant. I got all of his postcards, which are brilliant. And I just to do my next community content book. And I cannot tell you how happy I am about that. And it's like, I knew he was available to do Chaosium community content because he's done it. And he's available to anyone, and he's got a website, and you can contact him on that and say, hey, John, we met at Chaosium Con. Can you tell me your usual rate for doing a cover? And he told me, and I thought, I want that cover. So yeah, my next book's going to make a huge loss, but that doesn't matter because I'm going to have the Sumrow art.
Well, likewise, John, if you are listening to this, you're very welcome to drop some comments in the bottom there. We're all about community. Throw your tags in there, your name in there, your handle, and make yourself known to the rest of the community. That'd be absolutely amazing. You are known to the community, John, but just also drop yourself in there as well, again, because this is what we're about. This is what we're about. Nick, 1 or 2 last questions for you.
Far away. I have no hard deadline, by the way. I'm not up past my bedtime or anything.
Oh, okay. Amazing. This is a question from me, actually. This is one of my questions. I just recognize my own name. So from me, T.A. Newman, is what advice would you give to an author who is preparing for print on demand?
I'm glad you asked me that, T.A., because that's basically what I do. I write some stuff of my own. I help other people's stuff with layout, but I spend a lot of my time preparing things for print on demand. And the advice I would give you is to email nick.brooke@chaosium.com. Brooke has an E on the end. You'll find this written out on my page on the Chaosium site or in my forum, Sig on Burp Central, or you can just, contact me on Facebook. I won't stand on ceremony. Get in touch with me and say, I'd like to get something out in print on the Miskatonic, Johnstown, or whatever it may be. And I will help you. And it may be that you are very experienced at using layout programs yourself, and you just need to know the right protocols, and I'll advise you who to get to green light these things and where to submit it. And I've got documents explaining the steps of the process as you'll experience them. And I've got bluffers guides to how we've done things. And sometimes just casually mentioning something is really helpful to somebody else. So in our rough guide to Glamour, the digital edition has fancy shading around all the headings. I couldn't work out how to get that fancy shading to stay within ink limits for the print edition, so we got rid of it all. And it's like the print edition has absolutely gorgeous headings that don't have fancy shading. But one of my friends read that, and Andrew Logan Montgomery, who writes the best-selling community content on the Johnstown Compendium. God, how I hate that man. He must suffer. He's a really no, his books are just brilliant. And he read that and he said, oh, yeah, okay. You can't make those shaded headings I was wanting to use work for print on demand. I just won't use shaded headings. And it's just that, that saved him an awful lot of time banging his head against the wall. Now, somebody will be along in comments to tell me, oh, it's very easy to do shaded headings. Actually, all you need to do is, and then I will murder them. But it was like, just saying, yeah, here's the problem we found. Here's the solution we found. The problem was we couldn't do the pretty thing we thought we wanted. The solution was, well, let's not do it. Life goes on. So, yeah, I can offer help. I can offer hands-on help. Sometimes, for most of my Call of Cthulhu stuff, these books are basically prepared from the PDFs. So the author has got a PDF version that's pretty and digital and has art and things in it. And I have a non-patented, I'll explain it to anyone who wants to do it themselves, or I'll do it for you if your work is, if you're moderately pleasant and your work isn't too long, for just dropping the pages of the PDF into a layout program and then doing all the things that you can't do if you don't have access to layout. I use InDesign. So you can take the PDF pages, you drop them into layout, and then you adjust the ink levels and the margins and the bleeds and things there. And that's how most of this stuff gets made. Now, for my own books, obviously, I'm writing the things in Word and I'm cutting and pasting stuff into layout, and I'm doing all kinds of stuff with them. But you don't have to do that all from scratch. With the PDF pages into a thing, as long as the original PDF was fine, your laid out version will be fine, but it will be able to control things like bleeds and ink limits and gutters that Microsoft Word couldn't do, and maybe the programs you use to create it won't do. But I don't need any access to the underlying files. I just take, well, here's the commercial version you're selling. Let's gussy it up for print. Job done. So that's one of the secrets of print on demand. If you want to do it all yourself, which Kat did, I'm very happy to hold your hand through it. Alex did it for Heinrich's guide to character creation, and but what would happen was Heinrich would send me the laid out files, and I'd read through them and I'd say, schoolboy error, pitiful, but you got that wrong too. Why are you doing that? And I'd send them back to him with explanations of what needed to change, and in an alarmingly short time, a perfect version of the file would then be sent back to me. At least I'm saying perfect. It's possible that the great brains at one bookshelf will see things I missed, but I've tried to catch everything that they've ever noticed me getting wrong before. But again, that's the kind of pre-checking I can do. I can do that easily. I've got access to the tools you would need to do it yourself. But if you don't have the full version of Adobe Acrobat, I can run all the kind of pre-flighting and color checking and ink limit checking for you. And I'm happy to do that. It's part of my job for Chaosium. Now, this is the bit where I go off-piste. If you've got a community content title that isn't for Chaosium, I'm also happy to consider helping you with that. But for that, there may be a fee involved. I've helped get something out on the Dungeon Masters Guild. You may have heard terrifying stories of the vast limits on the number of people who are allowed to do layout for DM's Guild books. Well, I'm one of them. I'm on the secret list. And if you've got a DM's Guild bestseller, they have to be platinum over there because... Okay. There you go. But if you've got a DM's Guild bestseller and you want to be prepared for print by somebody who will not charge you the earth, just reach out. My address is at Chaosium, but I'll do this in my spare time, which is copious. So yeah, that's part of the answer. I'm happy to take your digital edition and turn it into a printable edition. I'm happy to support you if you want to do all of that yourself. And in extreme cases, I'm happy to redo layout of things where Chaosium desperately wants a print edition to exist. I've done that I suppose once. It was for the fattest book on the Johnstown Compendium, Armies and Enemies of Dragon Pass. There it is up behind me. That's a monster. That's almost 400 pages, and it nearly killed me. Ooh. So tedious. No disrespect to Martin Helston, the author, who's pulled together the buzzword is magisterial tome, but once you get into the back half of the book, it's table after table after table, and InDesign doesn't handle tables well. And I was going bleary-eyed, putting these little cartoon mannequins on top of their right tables and then adjusting all the text and everything like that. Took a while, but it's out now and it's beautiful. very good book.
I suppose picking up a scenario to play is going to be very, very different experience when you're picking it up and you're editing it and you're checking it, and it's a very different world. It's a very different experience.
Yes. And that's the thing. I can't honestly tell you I know the plot of Full Fathom 5. I do know where the most gorgeous things are, and I know where the sea shanties go. But I haven't read it cover to cover and read all the character sheets, because you don't need to do that to prep it for print. I do think it's a great piece of work, and I strongly recommend anyone who wants to sing sea shanties and pretend to go whaling in 1848 South Pacific should get Full Fathom 5 and play it in much the same way that if you enjoyed Kenyan big game hunting and man-eating lions molesting people, you should definitely get Sorrow in Savo by Bridget, and so on and so forth. If you're more into spooky Victorian ghost stories and cantankerous old ladies with shotguns, I'm told, I'm sure she's in there, haven't read that bit myself, like I say, looking at the files. Then there you go. So we've got all these things. They're all varied, they're all different stuff. My personal favourite things on the Miskatonic, I've got to say, are unusual settings and one-shots with pre-gen adventurers, because, sorry, we say investigators on this side of the pond, don't we? Pre-gen investigators, because then you know you've got a party that's going to get into the action, and it doesn't really matter if most of them get folded, spindled, and mutilated along the way, or just lose their marbles, because it's a one-shot, and the next game you play will be set somewhere else, different time. It's like watching a different horror movie. I'm not such a big fan of the either invulnerable or indeed frequently replaced investigators touring Lovecraft country. We're allowed to say that, aren't we? Yeah, the Miskatonic country, not knocking off disciples of Sathogua in every small hamlet they come across. That's not my preferred campaign style. I'd much rather take a break and say, hey, why don't we do something set at the Salem witch trials? Or, oh no, I've heard there's a really good scenario set in Edo period Japan. Actually, I think we've got a campaign in Edo Japan on Miskatonic. But there you go. It's horses for courses, isn't it? Would you rather watch lots and lots of things in basically the same setting with the same characters, or do you want to mix and match?
And it's that uniqueness, isn't it? That's what's going to draw people in, and a part of our community is, how do we look at? In fact, this actually brings us to our next question here. We've got this the community. There's a big part of marketing. There's a big part of getting our scenarios. But the question that's recently been in the Miskatonic Repository chat groups is about advice on pricing scenarios.
Right. I can give you advice on pricing scenarios, and I will do my best to make it snappy. First of all, don't give your stuff away, and don't give it away by putting it as pay what you want, because almost everyone wants to pay nothing. The two reasons for that are, if you don't value your work, it's very unlikely anyone else will. People download stuff that's free and they don't look at it. They download it and they don't look at it. It's a pack rat behavior. We've seen it countless times. People probably aren't going to look at your stuff if it was free. Also, you aren't going to get any kind of recognition or ego boost. I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about the joy of publicly letting it be known. Your scenario sold 50 copies. Your scenario sold 100 copies. It sold 250 copies. My God, it sold 500 copies. I mean, what kind of guy would sell 1,000 copies? I don't know, only that Andrew Logan Montgomery. But if your stuff is given away for free, you aren't in the drive-through RPG medal system, and you don't get that boost that comes from everyone knowing, oh yeah, this one's doing really well. It seems to be popular. There's a lot of buzz around it. Maybe I should get on board. I produced something called the Miskatonic Repository Catalog, which is dirt cheap. I think it's $1 for a spreadsheet detailing the setting and the time and the title and the page count and the price of everything on the Miskatonic Repository. And I say page count and price because I'm pretty good with these computer things, and I can divide one by the other, and I can tell you the average price per page of stuff on the Miskatonic. My advice to you, if you're starting out, is just to have a look at that and get a feel for, range of 15 to 20 cents seems reasonable for a scenario on the Miskatonic Repository, so why don't I pitch mine at roughly between 15 and 20 cents per page? You probably can't go wrong if you do that. If you're going much less than 15, you're on the cheap side, and that's great. You're a virtuous person. We value that. If you go much above 20, then my advice would be to have stunning layout and gorgeous internal art and an amazing cover, because otherwise people are going to look at that and they're going to say, well, why would I pay twice as much for this scenario as for that scenario when I don't know what's in it? I don't know who it's by. So I think there's a fairly tight range of prices, and I think price per page is the best metric. There are others. I know some people say, well, I know I'm writing something very short, but in the spirit of, well, I'd buy that for $1. I'll charge $1 for just 2 pages, and it's like 50 cents a page. Maybe your idea is worth that. Maybe it isn't. I'm not saying don't charge what you think your stuff is worth. I am saying there are some very expensive page-for-page products on the Miskatonic repository. They do stick out, and things like my catalog make it very visible when they stick out, because you say, oh, that price per page is shaded red by the machine. Maybe that's a big number. So that isn't all there is to it. The Cthulhu scenarios actually seem to be a little bit pricier on average than the Johnstown things for RuneQuest. I think that's because the Cthulhu works are shorter and tighter scenarios for the most part, whereas on the Johnstown we have more big fat tomes like the ones behind me, where it's harder to sustain a big ticket price. And in fact, there is research by Drive-Thru RPG, which they've shared publicly on blogs that you can look at, about the optimal pricing points for digital and print content on Drive-Thru RPG and their other sites. I strongly recommend those. And in fact, I'll try and give you the link so you can include it in show notes for this. Because one of the things you learn from that is that if your digital product costs more than $20 or maybe more than $19.95, sales will drop off a cliff. And I've tested that, and it's true. That book behind me there, Life of Moonsun Volume 1, is $30 in digital, and it doesn't sell well. It's gorgeous, lavish color illustrations throughout, beautiful piece of work. Some of our finest writing is in there, but it's $30, so it hasn't yet sold 200 copies. Shame. Wow. We're still very proud of it. It's a gorgeous book, and I take the opportunity to plug it every time I can. But if I'd been advised at the start, you know what, Nick, if you put out a digital product and it's more than $20, no matter how good it is, sales will disappoint. I'd have known, and we'd have said, well, let's not bother doing it at all. I've got a large chunk of my life back. Anyway, it's still obviously a successful book, a very good one. We're glad we made it, delighted we made it like that. But the fact is we didn't know about the $20 cutoff. And that's actually affected my campaign Black Spear behind me there, because that is, I think it's about $40 in print or $20 in digital. Now, print prices now are a bit funny because they split differently for standard color versus premium color. Standard color, so it's probably 36, and premium color is nearer 50. But in the old days, it was more straightforward. When I was young, when I just printed. So anyhow, that's $20. And one of the things that happened with that is I got the book to the size that I could print it and sell it for those prices and make my normal margin, which is 20. And I said, I can't write any more. So even though I kind of wanted to add an extra scene at the beginning of Act 5, I just thought, you're not doing yourself any favors if you do. Nobody's going to get the joke anyway. It's all about the French plantation scene from Apocalypse Now. I'm not even sure what I was going to achieve with it other than having a scene that paralleled the French plantation from Apocalypse Now. So I dropped it, and nobody knows, unless they listen to the podcast. But I've been going on for more than an hour now, so I think they've all gone, haven't they?
Well, Nick, I think that is where that's us. That's us done, and I think that's a perfect opportunity for me to actually just say, a huge thank you. This is our premiere backstage chat with the Miskatonic Playhouse. So thank you so much for being a part of it and giving us, insightful information. You're giving us, direct guidance, and I think just as an amazing opportunity for the community to get to kind of see you and hear you speak like this. So thank you so much for your time.
Well, as I said at the start, thank you very much for having me on the show. I'm always around in a couple of places. You can almost always catch me on Facebook, particularly in the Miskatonic Repository Creators Circle. You're quite likely to find me on BRP Central, Burp Central, the Chaosium old-style forums for people who aren't social enough to be on Facebook. You probably won't find me on any Discords. I'll be drifting past once in a while, but you're not going to be able to get a conversation there. That's the young person's game. But also you can email me. It's, as I said, nick.brooke@chaosium.com, and I will answer your questions about community content, and I will help you to the best of my abilities to get in contact with people who can really take your stuff to the next level. The other ambassadors are also around to help. So if you have a personal hatred for me and you don't want to deal with that bastard Nick Brooke, you can contact Bridget Jeffries or Alan Carey, the other two Chaosium community ambassadors. Unlike me, they know a lot about Call of Cthulhu. They have, in fact, written hugely successful Call of Cthulhu adventures and sold them on the Miskatonic Repository. So they may be better people to ask the questions I hate being asked about. Why can't I use Hounds of Tindalos in my scenario? Because I just get bored with that stuff. It's like, I don't know, we just told you couldn't use them. Go away. But they will be able to bore you with the reasons, which there are reasons, I'm sure. So there you go. So Alan and Bridget, you can take the difficult questions to them, easy questions and questions about print on demand to me. But one thing I wanted to say before we close this is at Chaosium Con earlier this month, we had a social event for community content creators and wannabe community content creators to get together in the morning and hang out. And it was just wonderful meeting so many people who either have published or are publishing or are thinking of publishing stuff on the Miskatonic Repository and the Johnstown Compendium. There was a lovely buzz in the room. It was an enthusiastic session. I'm sure that had nothing to do with the booze that Bridget was supplying people with at 9 in the morning. But it was very, very nice getting to meet creators, talk about their plans, talk about directions they're thinking of going in. I was particularly excited. There's somebody thinking of doing audio handouts for Call of Cthulhu scenarios and recording clues for so you download your little WAV files in a zip archive and you plug them in and you have genuine screaming at your game table. It wouldn't just be you pretending to be Fay Ray. It would be done by a talented voice actor. I think that's really exciting because we've got all the possibilities that we can explore in that space. So yeah, if you're not sure you're allowed to do something, ask me. If you're not sure you're allowed to do something and it's a boring question, ask Alan. If you want to be really encouraged about anything, ask Bridget. She's very, very encouraging. And also she is persistent. She will latch onto you and she will not let you finish until you have done the things that you need to do to knock your thing into shape. But we're here to help. Chaosium keeps us around because we want to help other community content creators succeed. We are all community content creators ourselves. It's what we do. It's what we did when we came to Chaosium's notice. And part of the way we came to Chaosium's notice was by making things and being podcasted at and talking to folks. And that's why I'm very happy to be here today, because you and the Playhouse are a vital part of the Miskatonic Repository's future. And I really do hope you get a queue of scenario authors lining up to say, play mine next, it's cool. Play mine next, it's set in Japan. Play mine next, it's in the far future on a desolate mining station. That would just be so cool for you. And you'd have all these different genres and idioms and things to work through. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with. But the Dragon one,
thank you.
Ooh, can you do a good Yorkshire accent?
I was very lucky that I got to play a very posh English chat, so I managed to kind of just navigate away from the Yorkshire accent. But yeah, we did. I tell you what, we had some good fun doing it. So I'm really looking forward to that coming out. I'm really looking forward to that being released, and it is a really great scenario as well. So yeah, but just speaking on what Nick said there as well, if you're watching this and if you are thinking with the Playhouse that you'd really like to get a scenario to us, you can please get in contact with us either through one of our Facebook page, our group, our Twitter, our every other social that we've got going on, and there'll be kind of a graphic here, no doubt, saying where you can kind of pick us up on all of that.
He didn't mention the Discord either. He's old.
We're on the Discord as well. Find our Discord. I am old. But also, you can send a scenario to us or just get in touch with us at miskatonicplayhouse@gmail.com. You're very welcome to get in touch with us at any time and we can kind of respond to you. So, Nick, thank you so much for your time. Community members, thank you so much for being with us and listening to myself and Nick catch up. Thank you so much, community, for your questions for Nick as well.
They were great.
And we look forward. Yeah, they were great. Thank you very much. We look forward to our next backstage chat. And our own, hopefully, little mini exclusive is hopefully that we're going to have Alan and Bridget joining us for some of these as well in the future. So we're going to collect the whole set if we can.
I'll send you some questions for them.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
As we draw the curtain on tonight's performance, we thank you for joining us and look forward to inviting you back to the Miskatonic Playhouse. In the meantime, you can also find us in the links below. And if you'd like to submit your scenario for us to play, email miskatonicplayhouse@gmail.com.